Welcome back to the channel. We got a fun article for you today. It's titled 16 Things That Are Technically Legal but Morally Questionable. It's the 21st century, so we'd like to think that by now we live in a morally sound society. Thankfully, that is the case in many areas of life, but in others, things have slipped through the cracks of the law, sitting in that awkward space between allowed and pretty shady. If you're looking for proof of this in America, just think about the following technically legal yet morally questionable things, and you'll understand. First up is paying workers below a living wage. It's pretty outrageous how it's still legal for companies to stick to the minimum wage, even though it's nowhere near enough to cover basic living costs. Some businesses rake in huge profits while handing their employees paychecks that barely last a week. That's just not right. We love to blame the companies, but at the end of the day, this is something that the government should be changing. Up next is aggressive telemarketing to the elderly. We've seen it happen, telemarketers cold calling older adults, pressuring them into buying useless products. Sometimes it's a matter of $100, but in more extreme cases, entire life savings get wiped out by huge deals. Frankly, we think these people should be in jail, but technically, they're not breaking the law. Up next is pharmaceutical price gouging. It's still common in the US for pharmaceutical companies to set astronomical prices for life-saving medicine. A classic example is seeing how a tiny bottle of insulin costs hundreds of dollars. Doesn't that feel like something out of a dystopian novel? Up next is charging outrageous ticket fees. Back in the day, even the biggest concert ticket would only cost a maximum of around $50. Now, though, the service charges and processing fees increase the cost far beyond the original ticket, and that's only if you get in early. In a worst case scenario, the tickets will have already been bought by robot touts, who will then go on to sell the tickets for 10 times the price. How is this legal? Up next is firing employees without cause. Did you know that at-will employment laws make it legal for companies to fire workers for almost any reason? One bad day and a cost-cutting move can leave someone unemployed without warning. You'd think by now that such problems would have to be resolved, but no. Up next is buying up water rights for profit. We're disgusted by how private companies can legally purchase water rights and then jack up prices or limit supply to entire communities. Water, a basic necessity for life, becomes a product to hoard and resell at a markup. Honestly, we're surprised that this isn't a human rights violation. Up next is filing frivolous lawsuits. Technically, you can sue someone for almost anything, even when you know you're stretching the truth. Some people and companies do it just to scare others into paying settlements or backing down, dragging someone through extensive, stressful legal battles without good cause. Once again, this is within the law, which feels like a contradiction of the entire judicial system. Up next is calling something organic when it barely is. Americans around the country are doing their best to eat more organically, but this is starting to feel impossible when all labels on food packages make all kinds of false claims. They're calling their products organic, but the legal standards are so loose that the word barely means anything anymore. Either way, they don't care, and they'll continue to charge more for this nonsense. Up next is pushing subprime loans on vulnerable people. Perhaps the cruelest action on this list is how banks and lenders find creative ways to profit from people who are struggling. Most notably, they'll offer loans with sky-high interest rates to folks with limited options, knowing that they've got nowhere else to go. Someday, we hope that these evil companies will be punished for these awful actions. Up next is using unpaid interns for real work. Internships have always been underpaid, but if the work is training-based, that doesn't feel so bad. That's far from the case with unpaid internships, though many of which concern real work and real responsibilities. Legally, these positions slide through loopholes if the company can argue it's educational, but the truth looks a lot like free labor. Next up is mass animal farming in tiny spaces. Perhaps you're a vegan or maybe you're a meat eater, but either way, there's no denying the factory farming practices are messed up. They'll pack animals into cramped, unnatural spaces to maximize profits, all while using horrendous techniques to maximize produce. Somehow, though, these practices are perfectly legal across huge parts of the world, including in America. Up next is patent trolling. Not many people are aware of this, but some companies exist purely to scoop up patents they never plan to use. Then, they'll sue anyone who accidentally builds something too similar. Shockingly, it's not illegal to patent vague ideas and weaponize them later, even though it drains creativity out of the business world. Up next is selling consumer data without proper consent. Another thing that is technically legal, yet deeply morally troubling, is how companies are selling our data without explicit consent. Of course, they'll argue that we clicked agree on their terms and conditions, but they know perfectly well that we're not reading hundreds of pages of legal jargon. Up next is political lobbying by corporations. It might sound like something from the 19th century, but even today, corporations can legally pour millions into political lobbying efforts in America. It's all perfectly above board on paper, but it leaves regular voters wondering whether their voices even matter, as laws get shaped behind closed doors. Up next is publishing misleading headlines. Contrary to popular belief, there's nothing illegal about publishing fake news. News outlets can sensationalize and mislead readers, and they will, as this is where they make the most of their money. Of course, the full story might explain things more clearly, but by then the emotional reaction has already been triggered and the clicks have already paid their bills. And finally is foreclosing on homes over tiny debts. Last but not least, there are a shocking number of cases where people have lost their homes over unpaid fees as small as a few $100s. Missed homeowners association payments are particularly common, yet the law often allows these foreclosures to proceed without much money. At the end of the day, we're talking about kicking families out of their homes over minor debts. That might be legally sound, but morally, it's sickening. Alright, there you have it, 16 things that are technically legal but morally questionable. I want you guys to get in that comment section and let me know which one of these 16 things you think is the most outrageous. Which one you think is the most outrageous? Get in that comment section. I'd be interested to hear from you. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please take a second to hit that like button. You can go ahead and smash that big thumbs up like button now. And if you really enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We put out fresh content daily, so there's always something fun for you to read and watch. Thank you for watching this one to the very end. I'm Brian Kingsbury. We'll talk to you on the next one. Bye.